Welcome to Digging Roots, where we uncover family stories, hidden histories, and the moments that connect us to who we are. Let's dive deeper into the Albee family's history. And if you want the full journey, don't forget, links to the earlier videos are right below. Born in Littleton, New Hampshire, Ichabod Henry Albee moved westward with his family to the frontier lands of Wisconsin. A sailor by trade, Ichabod's life was one of constant movement, from the waters of Lake Michigan to the battlefields of the Civil War, and finally to the gold rush hills of California. Like many Albees before him, when his country called, he answered. In 1861, the Civil War tore America apart, and Wisconsin men answered the call to fight. Ichabod enlisted as a private in Captain Hibbard's Company B of the 5th Regiment, Wisconsin Volunteers. Like all Wisconsin soldiers, he began his training at Camp Randall in Madison, a military encampment that would later become the site of Camp Randall Stadium, home of the Wisconsin Badgers. His regiment was sent eastward, joining the Peninsula Campaign, a Union offensive aimed at capturing Richmond, Virginia, the Confederate capital. In April 1862, Ichabod and the 5th Wisconsin took part in the Siege of Yorktown, a grueling month-long standoff between Union and Confederate forces. By May, when the Union finally forced the Confederates to retreat, Ichabod had already paid the price. Struck by typhoid fever and suffering from a rupture on his left side, he was left behind at White House Landing while the regiment advanced. 2 months later, still weak from illness, Ichabod rejoined his regiment at Harrison's Landing, Virginia. On September 17, 1862, Ichabod fought in the Battle of Antietam, one of the most pivotal battles of the war. It was a day of unimaginable bloodshed, over 23,000 casualties, the highest single-day loss of life in American history. It halted the Confederate invasion of Maryland and led to President Lincoln issuing the Emancipation Proclamation. For Ichabod, it was nearly his last battle. A wound to his left eye left him permanently disabled, and he was sent to Washington, D.C. to recover. From there, he was transferred to the U.S. General Hospital at Fort Schuyler in the Bronx, New York, where he spent months regaining his strength. Finally, in December 1862, he was honorably discharged, but his time as a soldier was far from over. By 1863, with the war still raging, Ichabod re-enlisted. This time he joined the 3rd Regiment Wisconsin Cavalry, a unit known for its role in protecting Union supply lines and fighting guerrilla forces in the West. After years of service, Ichabod officially mustered out of military service on May 19, 1865, in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. He had survived the war, but his journey was far from over. In 1864, while still in service, Ichabod married Maria Lucy Bird in Madison, Wisconsin. Maria's family had deep roots in Madison's early history. Her ancestors were part of the Bird Expedition, the group that built the first Wisconsin capital. She was considered one of the founding daughters of Madison. But Ichabod's restless spirit was not suited for staying in one place. Between 1868 and 1870, the family packed up and headed west to Sierraville, California. Sierraville was a boomtown during the California Gold Rush, attracting prospectors, merchants, and wagon trains searching for fortune. Ichabod's brother, Emerson Albee, was a wagon master, leading settlers west as early as 1860. It's likely that Emerson's letters and stories of the West were what inspired Ichabod to follow. Among their many children, Prosper Zariah Albee was born in Sierraville on January 23, 1875, his name carrying both the hope of the frontier and the legacy of his Revolutionary War ancestors. But California was not where the Albee story would end. Sometime in the late 1870s, Ichabod and Mariah would return home to Wisconsin and settle in the northern region of Wausau. Mariah Lucy Bird Albee passed away in 1892, and Ichabod followed in 1897. His life had been one of constant movement across battlefields and frontiers. From a New Hampshire farm to a Wisconsin harbor, from the Civil War's deadliest battlefields to California's gold country, he had lived a life shaped by war, adventure, and the pursuit of something greater. His descendants would carry that same pioneering spirit, moving beyond Wisconsin, across the Midwest, and into the 20th century, shaping the future in ways even he could not have imagined. For Hermann Kruger, life in Prussia was marked by loss, hardship, and survival. Born the eldest of 10 children, he was just a teenager when he became the one to hold the family together. By the time he was 15 or 16, he had no choice but to go to work, not just for himself, but for his siblings. But Prussia was no longer a place for new beginnings. A new world called to him. Herman and his siblings immigrated to the United States, seeking a chance for a better life. Some of his sisters remained in New York, but Herman pushed westward, traveling through Pennsylvania to Milwaukee, a city booming with German immigrants like himself. But Milwaukee wasn't far enough. From there, Herman walked to Stevens Point, then farther north, cutting his own trail through the Wisconsin wilderness. He carried only an axe, his tool for survival, his path to the future. When he finally reached Wausau, Wisconsin, he claimed land for a small fee, but the price wasn't just money. To keep the land, he had to live on it, clear it, and make it his own. The Wisconsin wilderness was harsh, untamed, but Herman was not alone. He had built strong friendships with the local Native Americans, learning their ways and respecting their land. He slept against a tree, his gun and axe beside him, always ready, always watching. As he built his homestead, he gave his brother William 40 acres nearby, but William's fate led him elsewhere. He left for North Dakota, leaving Herman alone once again. Then one day, a stranger passed through. Herman sat by a tree, gun in hand, watching the man approach, wearing a leather jacket, a sign of travel and experience. His name was John Wild, another German immigrant. He had come to Wisconsin Territory like so many others in the 1850s, when nearly 1 million Germans fled Europe for the promise of America. John lived in a log house on the farm next to Herman's land. As they spoke, Herman told him, "I'm looking for a wife." John looked at him carefully and replied, "I have a daughter, pretty, with dark, snappy eyes, plump, but she is pregnant." John Wild offered his daughter, Wilhelmina Minnie Wild, in marriage. She had become pregnant by a land surveyor who had already moved on, leaving her behind. Herman thought for a moment, then he agreed. Not long after, Bertha was born, and Herman and Minnie were married, not out of romance, but out of necessity, survival, and the unspoken understanding that they would make a life together no matter what. What began as an arrangement soon grew into something unexpected, deep, lasting love. Minnie was strong-willed, hard-working, and fiercely devoted to her new life. She worked fast and efficiently, and if Herman lagged behind, she would bump him on the head, not out of cruelty, but playfulness. But just as easily, she would hug him, kiss him, remind him that even in life of hardship there was tenderness. On a hot summer day, Herman rode into town. When he returned home, he carried an ice cream cone for Minnie. The summer heat had melted it completely, dripping through the fingers. But it didn't matter. She was sick, and he wanted to bring her something special anyway. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. In the wilderness, in the struggles of pioneer life, love was not about grand gestures. It was about holding on through everything. Together, Herman and Minnie had 7 children. Among them was a daughter, Matilda Wilhelmina Kruger, born in 1883 in Rib Falls, Wisconsin. Her name carried both her mother's and father's legacies, a reminder that their story of hardship, of survival, of love would not end with them. Herman Kruger came to America with nothing but his hands and his will to survive. He cut his own trail through the wilderness, built his home, and forged a life with a woman who had once been a stranger, but became his greatest companion. Together, they did more than just survive. They built something lasting. And from them, a new generation would rise, one that would carry their story forward into the next century. Sometimes history is not written in wars or grand events, but in quiet moments where 2 lives collide in the most unexpected ways. For Prosper Albee, a country school teacher, and Matilda Tilly Kruger, a farmer's daughter, it all began with a glance across the field. The Spooner Schoolhouse, built in 1894, sat 6 miles west of Wausau, Wisconsin. It was here that Prosper first saw Tilly, barefoot, working the fields alongside her father. They were from different worlds. Prosper was an educated school teacher, a man of books and learning with long ties to the country and its heritage. Tilly was a German immigrant's farmer's daughter, raised on the land and its hard work. And yet against family expectations and cultural traditions, they fell in love. Tilly's parents disapproved. Prosper was not German, or was he a farmer? When they sought a minister to marry them, he refused. Prosper was not Lutheran, and deeply religious tradition held strong. So on April 6, 1902, they eloped, marrying in secret at Prosper's sister's house in Wausau, Wisconsin. For a while, they were alone in their love, shut out from Tilly's family, cut off from the place she had always called home. But Prosper was determined to give her a new one. After the wedding, Prosper and Tilly boarded a train bound for Spur, Minnesota, a remote outpost between Bemidji and International Falls. The town, like their future, was uncertain. Spur no longer exists today, but back then it was a place of promise and struggle. Tilly's parents refused to speak to her for a year, but then one day her father made the journey to Minnesota. He brought her a cow, a customary gift when a daughter married, a symbol of acceptance and family reconciliation. Prosper and Tilly had made their choice, built their home, and now finally had her family's blessing. In 1903, their first child, Pearl Albee, was born at the home of Tilly's sister, Clara Cron. Uncle Charlie helped deliver the baby, a reminder that even in a new place, family ties remain strong. Prosper built a log cabin on 37 acres of land. The walls were papered with newspapers to keep out the cold. Bricks heated in straw warmed their feet on freezing nights. Tilly hunted game for food. She played the organ and accordion. She made all the children's clothes by hand. She worked as a midwife helping deliver babies in the community, and she drove the school sled, leading bronco horses through the snow. And Prosper? He taught school for 5 years, then turned to building roads and houses. He worked as a lumberjack in the summers. He served on the school and county boards. He even made stilts for the children, ensuring that play had a place beside hard work. Together they raised 7 children in Minnesota: George, Bird, Orrin, Arnold, Prosper, and Violet. But not all of them would survive. Their infant son Orrin passed away, a tragedy that left a permanent scar on their hearts. And soon another crisis would force them to leave everything once again. By 1917, their youngest daughter Violet was sick. She suffered from a heart condition, and Minnesota, still wild and lacking medical care, offered no hope for treatment. Tilly made the decision they would move to Rockford, where doctors and hospitals could give Violet a fighting chance. There was also plenty of work, and Prosper had family there. The journey was not easy. To afford the trip, the entire family worked together. Everyone peeled cedar logs from their swamp. They sold the lumber to cover the cost of train tickets. They packed shoebox lunches filled with farm-raised chicken for the trip. But tragedy struck again. Shortly after they arrived in Rockford, Violet passed away. She was buried in the cemetery next to their rented house, and yet life had to move forward. In Rockford, Prosper and Tilly welcomed 2 more daughters, Lucille and Betty. Over the years, Prosper and Tilly built a new life in Rockford. Prosper worked as a lumber grader and scaler at the Colony Chair Company. Later, he took a job with the City of Rockford Street Department, where he worked until retirement. Tilly often said she would never marry a German farmer, and she was right. She married an English school teacher. But together they built a life as rich as any farm, as full as any schoolhouse, and as enduring as the roads Prosper helped lay. They were married for 63 years, raising 9 children, each of whom went on to live extraordinary lives in their own way. The oldest, Pearl Albee, moved to Chicago and became a buyer for Marshall Fields. She opened her own clothing shop and later worked for the Chicago Tribune in the fact-checking. She never married but had a life rich in family and friends. George Albee served as a Rockford police officer and a military policeman during World War II. He would later open a private detective agency with an Albee cousin. Betty Albee, the youngest, inherited her father's imagination, her mother's work ethic, and a spirit entirely her own. And that wraps up our Albee family history. If you've got family stories of your own, share them in the comments. We'd love to hear them. Thanks for joining us on our journey. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time on Digging Roots.